Evelyn Glennie, welcome to Beyond Stage Fright. You're the first person in history to successfully create and sustain a full-time career as a solo percussionist. You perform worldwide with the greatest conductors, orchestras and artists. You've recorded more than 30 CDs and more than 170 pieces have been written for you by some of the world's most eminent composers. You've been given more than 80 international awards, including Dame of the British Empire. You regularly give masterclasses designed to guide the next generation, and your vision is to teach the world to listen. And having been profoundly deaf since the age of 12, you yourself have had to listen in the deepest and broadest sense. You've done such groundbreaking work in this field, and I wondered whether pioneering repertoire, instruments, and the role of the solo percussionist have increased or lessened any performance anxiety you might have.
Well, it's a very interesting question, actually. And I'm not sure if I can truly answer it because obviously I don't have the experience of playing established repertoire that's been, written 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and so on. And so therefore you don't have that opportunity to compare performances. You can't buy 10 recordings of a piece of music and compare interpretations and think, I quite like this or that, and take bits and pieces from it. So I think that there has to be that level of confidence, faith and discipline to make a decision. And I think that making a decision really helps the feeling of authority in what you do. So it also gives you the feeling of freedom to an extent, in that you know that, well, you can try it this way during this performance, knowing that there are 100 different ways, many different ways that you can deal with a situation. And part of that is because you're having discussions with a composer. Part of it also is the fact that you're dealing with different instruments, sometimes not your own instruments. So you have to just make these subtle changes all of the time. And but also ultimately it's listening to the audience, because they will play a big part in how something is interpreted. And so with all of these different sort of combinations and things coming into play, ultimately you have to, pick up that mallet or stick and strike something. You've got to do that. You've got to place the bow on the string. You've got to, press that keyboard key with your finger. There has to be that moment where only you can make that happen. So I think that knowing that there are so many different ways of approaching a piece of music, playing a piece of music, and being influenced by so many things, that should give you this feeling of discovery, of curiosity, rather than it has to be played like this, and if it's not played like this, then it's wrong. There is no right or wrong. So I think in my instance, with the new repertoire, it's given me this sense of freedom.
And how much, you talk about communication with the audience, how much does really feeling that you're listening and communicating with the audience, how much does that impact how free and relaxed you feel on stage?
I think it can work sort of in many different ways, really. If you embrace the fact that there's an audience there and they will do something to your performance that never seems to happen in the privacy of your own four walls, it's by embracing them and knowing that it's a discovery for us all. Playing a new piece of music really is a discovery for us all. I happen to have it maybe a few weeks or a few months before the audience do, but basically it's still a real learning curve for me too, and I'm asking the audience to help me with that journey. Rather than putting a barrier up where it's a feeling of, oh my gosh, I must perform to them and I must play well for them and I must do this and I must do that. When it's a shared experience, you really do embrace the whole occasion, I think, in a much more holistic way.
The other thing that I notice when I watch you perform is how physically free you are. I mean, you seem as if you're dancing, amongst your instruments. And I notice with a lot of musicians, and sometimes myself too, that it's very easy to sort of armour ourselves with physical tension just to kind of stop the perceived blows of judgment and criticism. Do you feel that physical freedom really helps you with any possible performance anxiety?
I think it probably does. I'm not sure if I'm really aware of it, because the most natural thing for a percussion player is to have that body balanced. And I mean, I would probably say that percussionists and singers are the two types of instrumentalists whereby the body is in a very natural position and it can move in various directions very freely, and many different muscle groups are used, quite literally. So to play a marimba is quite different to playing a snare drum. For striking a cymbal is very different to striking a triangle, and so on and so forth. So it is very much about listening to every part of that body, and basically it's the machine, it's the engine, and that has to be well oiled before anything else can come into play. But I think also, what I find is that I do make a distinction between practice, rehearsal, and performance. So most of the time I'm actually rehearsing, not practicing, because practicing is more about, trying to maybe get this type of sound or that type of sound, or how is the mallet or stick feeling in my hand? Is there tension there? What am I doing? It's really listening to the mechanics of what I do as a percussion player. But when I'm rehearsing, even if it's still in the same little room, I'm rehearsing with the audience in my mind. I'm deciding now, am I in an outdoor venue today? Am I in a cathedral today? Am I in a really dry acoustic today? Am I in a small chamber hall? Am I in a big symphony type hall? Where am I today? So in my mind, that then allows me to make those sort of physical judgments, as it were, according to the acoustic and the size and the type of venue I'm in. So, for example, if I decide today that I'm in an outdoor venue, I know that all of my dynamics will come up. So to play just nothing, carry off-stage type of effects will not be effective in an outdoor venue. Therefore, physically, everything is projected in a different way. Whereas if I think to myself, now I'm in a cathedral, a very wet acoustic, where the tiniest thing will be injected, then physically I will change according to that type of acoustic. But all the time it's a sense of giving to the audience, always having that audience there. So even if you're playing a scale, what type of scale do I want to play? What kind of mood, feeling do I want to give when I'm playing that scale, rather than mechanically just going up and down and well, to warm up. Well, warm up what? What exactly are you warming up? Are you warming up mentally, physically? What is it? So even if I only have access to a little practice pad, that is still being struck in a way whereby it's a sense of performance. And it's an attitude really more than anything, and it's a habit. So the more I get into that frame of mind, the less of a big step it is to suddenly walk on stage and see the audience there, because you've had the audience there in your head all along, really. So it's not so much about visualization, whereby you're in this type of acoustic, therefore I'm always going to play in this way with an audience in my mind. It isn't about that at all. It's just having that presence of people there, and the presence of the space there, because ultimately that is your instrument.
Well, it's actually feeling something as much as it is seeing and hearing. It's bringing in all the senses, as you do so obviously and so well, and what's so inspiring about your work, I think.
It is just that experience, and I'm not saying that everybody's going to have the same experience at all. Some people will enjoy that, some people will not. And also just having that in your mind is important. It lessens the sort of feeling where you have to make everybody like what you do. It's not about that at all. It's about giving them an experience so that if they go out of the venue just thinking, well, you know, that was interesting actually, and I would quite like to explore that a little bit more, or, well, I didn't really like that or get that, but I found it curious, you know, or for others, wow, that was just, you know, yes, that made me feel this, made me feel that. So it's important for me, again, because I'm dealing with new repertoire, it's too early to categorize that repertoire even, that it is just an experience, because it's an experience for me as well, you know, having that journey to work through a piece of music.
When I see you perform, you seem incredibly focused, as if nothing could knock you off balance. You know, you're absolutely there. And I wondered how you manage that. What goes into that kind of focus?
That's hard to say, because all sorts of things are going through your mind, actually. But what is important for me is to be aware that what you're doing at that moment is the most important thing that you are doing. So, for example, as I'm talking with you, you're the most important person in my life right now, you know. That's it, simple as that. And it just means that it lessens then all of the other thoughts or baggage or things, lists and this and that you may be loading yourself with. So when you have that opportunity, which is quite rare, to just focus on that one thing, knowing that you're not going to be interrupted by people or emails or this or that it's a wonderful opportunity to get to know yourself. It really is. It's a wonderful opportunity to connect in any way you want to connect, whether it's connecting with the music, connecting with the performance experience, connecting just with your physical body, with mentally what you're feeling at that time. You know, it is an opportunity. And I think I've learned a lot about myself by having those moments of connection, really. But I think also I'm naturally a determined person, so in order to achieve something you have to focus on it. You have to have that aim, basically, and that's really important for me. So when you are engulfed in a piece of music, I'm not saying that I'm only thinking of that piece of music. Sometimes the mind does wander, but let it wander if it feels quite natural to do so. What I have found is that I have taken note of my breathing more when I play. And whether this is an age thing or whatever it is, but it just seems to happen whereby I'm just more aware of reminding myself to breathe. It just sounds so incredibly simple, but it's amazing how we do forget to breathe when we perform. And I think that the natural physicality of playing percussion allows you to have this openness and resonance throughout the body in order to breathe, and to breathe in a very natural way. So I think that's the one thing I've noticed recently that has come into play.
Do you have any form of performance anxiety? You don't appear to, but maybe you do.
Yes, I think that if we're all honest with ourselves, we do have that. We all have a form of, whether anxiety is the right word, I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel nervous, even if it's with a piece that I've played many, many times before. But there's just a kind of, again, that presence, really, and responsibility. And again, you have to put it in perspective. I think that the more known you are for what you do, there's obviously expectations there, but it's very important to be realistic and to know that you will always do your best. That won't change. That's a kind of level that you set yourself, that you will always do your best. So, and then you have to let natural circumstances take their course. And live performances is all about that. You know, you could be the most prepared as you can possibly be, and for some reason that performance just didn't quite do it for you, you know, and you can't quite explain why. There's no reason. It's just simply, it's just is, and that's that. And for me, I just take note of it, but let it go. Just let it go. There are other times whereby it may not go well and you know exactly why it is. And you've really then got to take the time to address those things and to see whether they can be eliminated. There are times whereby you may feel less prepared. It could be that the music has come late, or you just haven't had the time to really have access to the instruments and so on. You feel slightly less prepared. But that focus is so razor sharp that it makes the performance incredibly exciting, you know. So again, it's important to take the time, you know, after a performance, when you're lying in bed or something at night, and you just sort of do an analysis, you know, a post-mortem, but let it go, you know, not to dwell on that. Otherwise, bit by bit, it'll just sort of drill into your system and you begin to lose confidence in this area or that area and so on. That is not what it's meant to be. Every time an analysis is to be a learning curve, and again, an opportunity, you know, to learn about yourself and your circumstances.
It sounds as if that whole sort of openness and curiosity that you have and communication with the audience, along with the physical freedom, really helps you to not get completely kind of tense and anxious in a negative way.
Yes, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, you have made the decision, or I have made the decision to be there. I made the decision to accept that particular event or concert, whatever it may be. So, you know, I could have quite easily have said no, you know, and declined that opportunity. But something inside of me said yes to that. And once you've said yes, you've then got to take the responsibilities that go with that. So you know what the end result needs to be. You know that, well, you will be standing up on stage there, delivering a sound meal to our audience. That's the end result, really. And so how you get there, that journey in between, is very important. So you do have that chance to really think mentally, you know, how you want to deal with this situation and so on. Again, knowing that all sorts of circumstances, unknown circumstances, will come into play. So having that flexibility in your thinking, right up to the moment of the performance, even during the performance, has to be there. So you know that you can go off in these different directions if need be.
Yes, because that takes me to a question about performing disasters, or what you might feel internally is a performing disaster may not be what the audience feels. But how do you manage that, things that really you feel are really going wrong?
Well, it is interesting, because if something goes wrong early on, you just have to have the strength of mind and thought to know that that's happened, move on, you know, just get yourself back on track immediately, you know, and not to start dwelling on why and how and whatever. Just get yourself on track. And you know that your level, your sort of poor level of playing is still of a high standard. Of course, there will be, you know, individuals in the audience who may have noticed this, who may have noticed that. But even if you give a wonderful performance, there will always be people who are nitpicking at things, and that's life. And especially now with social media, you know. So again, we just have to, you know, accept that, but believe in yourself. You've got to have this belief in yourself. And then I find that afterwards, if I've really felt that, you know, that just simply was not good enough, you know, I'm very realistic with myself, and I'm hard on myself, but I'm also realistic. And I just talk to myself, and I talk myself through the situation. Why did that happen? Well, I should have done this, or I should have checked that, or that was entirely my doing. That needs to be sorted out next time, and so on. If it's something completely out of your control, then hey-ho, that's a situation. If it's something that was in someone else's control and you could have influenced that, it is important to communicate with each other. It really is, so that you that kind of thing doesn't happen to yourself again or to other people. So again, just, listening to your colleagues, because they're all part of that performance. So the person who cleans the stage, who gives you water at the end of the concert, who gives you a towel, or who cleans the dressing room and so on, they are all part of that performance. So we have to respect each other in what we do.
One of the things I've noticed about your performances is that, and also I've seen this in your documentaries as well, that everything seems to be just an extension of life. Do you know what I mean by that? It's sort of, in the one of the documentary that I watched, is it Touch the Sound?
Or Touch the Sound,
Touch
yes.
Sound. The way that everything worked so that, you could see somebody tapping their foot or somebody's jaw moving, and it was all part of percussion. And it was as if what you're doing is just taking everyday life and it all becomes one thing somehow.
Yes, and that really is true. And it's very hard to explain, actually. And maybe that's where my interest in sound and listening plays such a big part. The percussion playing is simply part of that. They're the tools I need in order to create these sort of instances. But it is being aware of what is around you. So, I could walk into an orchestra, for example, never having been with them before, never having worked with a conductor before, never having been in that particular hall before, playing a brand new piece of music. My first thing that I listen to are literally the faces of the orchestra and the conductor and so on. Not the sound that they're making and things like that. It's the faces, and that can tell me a lot as regards to how then you may sort of deal with a situation or how this is all going to progress, because ultimately it's teamwork, and that's very important. So even if you're doing something solo, it isn't just about this part of the body that's functioning, it's the whole part,
And tell me a little bit about the logistics of dealing with an international touring life, managing all the different aspects of a performing life, how that works and how you manage, sort of performance stress in that sense.
Well, it's really important that as soon as a call comes through or an invitation comes through, that's the beginning of the performance in my mind. It really is. So therefore, the team that is working with you has to be well oiled. So they really can, deal with a lot of aspects, the administrative aspects, the taking care of the scheduling, the bookings and that type of thing. That's so important. Otherwise, you simply cannot do all of those elements well. It's just too much to do. So having that team there in place is I think, very crucial indeed, and that we're all after the same thing, we're all aiming towards the same goal, as it were. And so once I know that all of that is being taken care of, whether it's visas or booking flights or whatever it is, that's a large part of the performance. It really is. And then making sure that the communication with the promoters and the organisers is good, it's healthy, and it's constructive. It's not time wasting, it's to the point, and that they really get something special through that process alone, even before you've turned up or played. So having that really good communication is so vital, because that will allow possibly for a rebooking in the future, or for them to have faith in having another percussion player because it's gone smoothly this time. That's really important. So it's not just all about yourself, really. And then when you get to the venue or you're on site, my job then is to simply really communicate with all of my fellow colleagues there and get this sound meal going. That's what my focus is. So I don't want to be, thinking about, how do I get from the hotel to the airport or the airport to the venue or the this or that, that should all have been sorted out beforehand. So that's how I see it anyway, and it plays a big part then in what you produce on stage.
And what does it feel like when everything's really working well on stage? That sense of things really flowing.
It's a fantastic feeling, actually. And in a way, if you're really, really realistic about this, it doesn't happen that often. By that I mean you can have good performances and you can have, wonderful things happening within a performance. But when you have that feeling, it's almost like when we did the Olympic ceremony in London, where you had this incredible energy of giving that, that was something that was so magical to feel. And when that feeling is felt on stage and off stage, it's an incredible thing. It really is. And we always try to strive for that. Of course we do. But with live performances, of course, we're all performing. Every member of the audience is performing as well. So someone may drop a bag of sweets, or suddenly a mobile phone goes off, or whatever it may be. We've got no control of that. And that's live performance, and we have to embrace that as part of the performance, really. But it's always a sense of wow, and that's why you do it, and on so many levels that's why you do it.
Evelyn Glennie, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you for having me.